I want to now introduce somebody who is going to talk about the purpose revolution. And I'm going to say a few things about Duncan. The thing I'm most impressed about, yes, he has an amazing academic background. Yes, he has basically worked in Africa, in the Americas and Asia as the International Development Director for the Salvation Army. He's been Managing Director for an African Agricultural Investment Fund. But he has also, is this true, Duncan, run 6 marathons in 6 days. Wow. Never again. I don't blame you. It's bad for your knees. But anyway, can I introduce Duncan Parker, please, to talk about the Purpose Revolution. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good stuff. We're going to have some intro music. This is nice. This is good. It's a great privilege to be here with you this morning. And I'm looking forward to just sharing with you briefly about a few thoughts that I have. And I've used these words very carefully. I've used the word revolution rather than evolution. I feel very strongly that our discussions over the last couple of days, some people talk about making sure we do things right and carefully, and some people talk about the urgency of the situation. What I'm going to try and share with you today, for those of you in the industry, from a business point of view, I want to share with you the huge opportunity that I see within the purpose revolution, within what we're talking about over these next couple of days, or the last couple of days rather. But I also want to express the urgency to you. But I'm going to start with a story, if I may. Rajam, thank you for the introduction. My background educationally and the first half of my career was as a development aid worker. I worked for large charities, large NGOs, trying to make the world a better place, particularly for people, but also with an environmental point of view. And I want to take you to Tanzania, in the great continent of Africa. And as a young man, I had a great privilege to be there, traveling around, and I want to tell you about a story in a village in a place called Shilanga in Tanzania. And I met a family there. It was at the height of the AIDS pandemic. And the family now consisted of just the mum. The father had passed from HIV and AIDS. And Mrs. Ibrahim had 5 children. And when I met Mrs. Ibrahim, I was fortunate to be working with an NGO who were trying to help this huge issue of the number of AIDS orphans in Africa. Children who, there were too many, they were too numerous to put into an orphanage. And we had to find new solutions to a huge problem of looking after these children. And I asked a stupid question. I was a young man, that is my only excuse. I was ignorant. And I said, Mrs. Ibrahim, what can we do to help? And Mrs. Ibrahim, her physical condition was very poor. Her husband had died of AIDS. She knew very shortly she'd be dying of AIDS. And she gave me her baby. And she pointed to the other 4 children. And she said, you can look after these. That moment in time, excuse me, I practiced this and this didn't happen, gave me my purpose in life. It gave me my North Star. It told me what I was going to do, where I was going, and how I was going to do it. It was a purpose revolution for me. And I tell you that story because it's travel related. I'm not in the travel industry, but travel changes lives. Travel is important. It broadens our minds. It makes us more accepting and understanding of other people. It changes our perspective on the world. It changes our whole being. And so I believe in travel. I believe in the wonders that happen when we go from our comfort zone with our privilege somewhere else. So I'm going to try and explain, and I promise not to get emotional again, okay? I apologize. And explain, I think, some really simple ways that we can change the world. But first, let me express to you that I think the 4th industrial revolution is not just about the technologies that we use. It's not just about business, but it's actually about society. What I believe is that if businesses do not affect society, people and planet, they will not survive, they will not be successful, they will not thrive. And there are some megatrends happening in our world today. Megatrend 1, there's a shift in global economic power. So where money is held. Megatrend 2, there are the demographic shifts, the rise in population. People are living longer. Middle classes, people with more money are growing. There's accelerating urbanization. We're moving from the countryside to cities. There will soon be cities of 50 million people. 50 million people. How does that affect travel and tourism? The rise of technology and the digitization of the world that we live in. And of course, our subject matter over the last few days, climate change. And the technological developments in our world, they'll disrupt how we do business. The demographic shifts that we see will affect the where and the who of the economy of the future. And the environmental issues that we are looking at will affect what we do. We've been talking about that over the last few days. But because of this, and accelerated by this, I believe why we do business will change also. And I am calling this the purpose revolution. And at the core, the heart of the purpose revolution is a reframing of the concept of value. What is it that we should be measuring within our businesses? Not just the profit line within our balance sheet, but our impact on people and planet. So it's my belief, and I think we're seeing evidence of this, that businesses that really matter in today's world will have absolutely a view on people, planet, and profit. And what I want to argue over the next few minutes, conscious that I stand between you and a cup of coffee, is that sustainability, net zero, is not good enough. We have to get to regeneration. We have to get to a place where we are improving the planet, not just being neutral. And we know that there's lots of problems in the world. We know pollution, inequality, poverty, hunger, all of these issues, and now war within the world. Our world faces many challenges, and the traditional mechanisms, state, NGOs, charity, don't necessarily have all the answers. And I want to suggest to you that business does have many of the answers, and therefore our industry, the travel industry, has huge opportunity to transform the world that we live in. And actually, maybe it's the only answer. I'm going to show you a few examples of that in a minute. I'm always affected by the idea that when we're using things, I really like those of you that were here in the last session, that image of the paper towel dispenser diminishing the world's resources. On August the 22nd this year, we reached the end of our budget for the use of resources and waste management on planet Earth. So everything we have done since August the 22nd, we're in deficit budget on our planet. Actually, very soon, we're going to need 2 planets. That is the reality. And so investors, so if you're in business, if you're a government trying to encourage growth of an eco-tourism destination in Saudi Arabia, as we heard in the last session, there is money available if you will do things right. If you're going to do things in the traditional way, just to make money, just to grow, just to be big, you will find that money diminishes. Everybody knows there is an emergency on planet Earth. And actually, as well as investors, customers, stakeholders, shareholders, supply chains want to know that you understand what is going on planet Earth. They want to know that you have an understanding of the social issues, but they also want to know that you've got an understanding of the environmental issues. And they want to know you understand the megatrends that are happening that I referred to earlier. The fact that there is a shift in where money is held and who has power within the world. They want to understand you know the issues around population growth. Cities of 50 million, what are the transport challenges? What are the waste challenges? What are the educational challenges for these places where population is growing through the roof? They want to understand that you have an understanding of the transformational impact of technology. I see a world, I have a son who's 18, and he has a vision. He's going to be a computer game designer. This is where he wants to end up. He doesn't want to travel as much as I did at his age. He'd like to do it through virtual reality, and he wants to travel with his friends that he knows in China, in Japan, and in America. And he has this kind of gang of people that he loves online. It's completely alien to me. I don't particularly love it. I don't particularly encourage it, but that's what he does. And he sees a world where we will be traveling the world, having amazing adventures, amazing experiences, not even on this earth, but through virtual reality as an example. And I see a huge growth here that can affect the travel industry in terms of how we experience places that we visit. And obviously the world wants to know that we understand the impact we have environmentally, and the challenges that exist there. This chart here shows that for the 400,000 years before 1950, we never exceeded 300 parts per million on planet Earth. Never. We know that. 1950, we went through that roof with things like motor cars and air travel and transport and many other industrial transformations. And if you look at the top of that graph where we're going straight up, it leads to this graph where we have the challenges around pledges that we have made as a planet Earth, but also what happens if we hit our pathways. Evolution isn't enough. Revolution has to happen. And we have to have a purpose. We have to have a destination of where we are going. So I've been trying to argue that business can transform the world, and I'll get to the point now. Here in the middle, we have, hopefully something familiar to you, the Sustainable Development Goals that we as humans on planet Earth have come together and agreed is the way that we can transform our planet. 17 promises covering education, covering the seas, covering air pollution, covering how we can make the world a better place, get rid of some of the inequalities, bring gender parity. 17 promises that we've made. On the left-hand side, you can see how much money is available to impact the development goals. So to hit the development goals by 2030, we need 3 to 4 trillion US dollars invested into that area to achieve those goals. Governmental aid, development aid, is about 150 billion US dollars a year. Governments don't have the answer to sustainable development goals. Global philanthropy is around 200 billion US dollars per year. People giving money, companies giving money to the Sustainable Development Goals. But when you look at business, if we can divert less than 1% of global financial assets, things that are invested into other businesses and opportunities, we can achieve the development goals. So for those of you in business, what's your business doing to attract that money? If you're looking for money, I know there's some people in here looking for money for their business. If you position it right, the stats tell you there's a huge amount of money out there. And we've just heard it for what's happening in Saudi Arabia and the challenges that are the growth that is happening there because of how they are doing it. So let me summarize quickly. I think the global economy, I know the global economy is in the middle of a fundamental shift. One that's going to radically change how we do business. And this is the why, the purpose revolution. And at the heart of that is the reframing of value from just financial value, but to people and planet. Let me give you some principles to guide our journey. I'm talking about the purpose revolution. So the first principle is purpose. Start with the end in mind. When I traveled to Tanzania, I got gifted my purpose in life. And I choose to achieve that purpose through business. I believe business inherently has to be sustainable. Charities aren't particularly sustainable. They constantly have to ask you for money. Business, through its very nature, has to be sustainable, otherwise it goes bankrupt. So if we can do sustainable business, we can change the world. Involve people. I was in a discussion yesterday about the role of, when we go to a destination, the local people, and what role they have as stakeholders, as shareholders, in what is happening within their country. You'll have heard about measuring and measurements. And I'm going to talk in a moment about simplicity of that. But measuring what the impacts and then measuring our value creation are critical. And obviously our approach of how we do this. We heard about the nudge theory, not overwhelming people with how they can improve. Whether that's an individual, a customer, or actually even a business. I see businesses just go, yeah, this is really hard. How do we do this? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. How do we make sense of complexity? This reminds me of trying to unravel Christmas lights at Christmas. I kind of spend a whole day unraveling lights for my tree. Has anyone been to London? Show of hands if you've been to London. Have you used this map? Do you recognize this map? Yeah. At first, when you see it, it's a bit complex, isn't it? What's the first thing you need to know in order to use this map?
Where you're starting and where you're going.
Exactly. And the second thing, where am I going? So where do I start from? And where am I going? And there's a common language appearing within the purpose revolution for business. How do we simplify what it is we're trying to do? Number one, we set a vision. We set our purpose. Where are we as a business going? What are we about? And if I want to measure how I get there, if I want to plan how I get there, I need to know where I am now. And the common language that's being used is something called a theory of change. A simple logical framework that starts on the right-hand side of the page, really. Where am I going? And then we work backwards. What do I have to do to achieve those things? What are my impacts? What are my outcomes? What are my outputs? What are my activities? And so for those of you that kind of want something to take away from the last few days, thinking, where do I start as an individual, as a business, as a country, as an organization? Let me recommend that to you, the logical framework that is called a theory of change. And that's what we particularly specialize in. I started with a story. I'm going to finish with a story, if I may. I'm taking you back to Africa. Promise not to get emotional this time. I'm going to take you to the Kazuko Game Reserve in southern Africa. 40,000 acres of wasted farmland, just been over-farmed. It wasn't in good shape. And a business plan was written that had a purpose in mind. And the purpose was to regenerate the land, bring jobs and employment to the area through economic tourism. They've done a number of amazing things. They've created a beautiful place to go and visit. That's important because it has to be attractive. It has to be something that works well in the tourism industry. But they've completely transformed conservation in that area. They've provided hundreds of jobs. And around that, they've created an ecosystem, an entrepreneurial ecosystem of micro providers to that, whether it's for food, for travel, et cetera, plumbers, you name it. Incredible transformation. Conserving is now one of the places that you can see the white rhino. It's one of the places where some of the big cats are really thriving. And then in Uganda, close to Tanzania, in the Budongo forest, this is where, let me just use this as my final example. Without the travel industry, the chimpanzees, and I'm going to show you the gorillas in a minute, their time would be up. There were 600 chimpanzees left in this forest. And the reason that the chimpanzees were diminishing was because the local populations had no money. And one of the economies they had was to chop down trees, turn it into charcoal, sell the charcoal. So the forest was becoming degraded. So the solution that has been devised in collaboration, in partnership, which has been a real theme for me over the last couple of days as part of the solution. How do we do this? In collaboration, in partnership. And this was a public and private partnership that was established with investors, the government, and the travel industry. There's now a beautiful place you can go and stay in, where jobs have been created, the forest is being protected, people are being incentivized not to chop down the trees. The chimps are thriving. They will grow. That population will grow. And the solution was travel. And it's been done in a environmentally sustainable way in terms of growing the ecology there, but also how you get there and how they operate as a hotel and as a tented village. Actually, they've decided not to build. They're using a tented village as part of their ecological provision of services there. And then the Bwindi Primate Lodge, you can see the gorillas. Again, numbers dwindled down to 400. 400 gorillas. And again, the solution has been actually bring people to come and see, to learn, to be educated, but to do it in the perfect way, where ecology is saved, where the gorillas are saved, where the forest is saved, and where we travel in a sustainable way. I hope I've challenged you. I hope I've given you some thoughts and questions. My name's Duncan. It's my great privilege to have been here. Do we have time for one or two questions? We do? Perfect. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments or opposing ideas. I'm very comfortable with that. Don't feel that you can't oppose. I've baffled you.
I will ask you a question.
Thank you.
How to get to where you are with your way of thinking, how long did that take? Is that a process of where you have got to with the Purpose Revolution, this whole concept? Tell me about that.
Yes, thank you. That's a really good question. So when I met my Purpose Revolution, I was heartbroken that I couldn't look after those 5 children. Obviously, it would be inappropriate for me to take those 5 children and promise to look after them. But I did promise to do something, and I went to study development, and so that I could be the best that I could be. That was my kind of moment. I worked in the INGO, aid and development sector, for 15 years. And I became incredibly convinced. I read a book by a guy called Muhammad Yunus, who is the creator of Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, which provides microloans. I'm talking $10, $20 loans to women so they can start their own businesses. Rather than making them recipients of aid, actually giving them an opportunity to create economy and to be self-sustaining and not victims, be masters of their own destiny. And I saw that as the solution to global poverty, naively again. I'm a work in progress, Rajan, all the time. And so I decided to ply my trade as an aid and development worker in economic development, so creating microloans. So I ran a microfinance business in the UK, from the UK, but into sub-Saharan Africa. But then I realized that not everyone's an entrepreneur. And actually, when you have in villages, if you make lots of loans, everyone just sells whatever is available at the time. So you'll go to the market and everyone's selling tomatoes, and that's not a very good, it's not good for the price of tomatoes, let's say. So I realized that actually what we needed to do was also create SME businesses that could create employment, not just enterprise. And I left the sector after 15 years to go and work for a large fund management company who wanted to engage in impact investing, the idea that people, planet and profit were a triple bottom line that we could look at, actually sometimes quadruple bottom line. If we put spirituality into that, how can we improve the planet through those 4 things? And so it's an emerging asset class, but I think most of the markets are pretty convinced that this is the way forward around measuring and providing returns across people, planet, and profit. Thanks, Rajan. Great question. Carol, I think you had a question.
I was just going to say, with all of these sustainable elements that you examples of, people often talk to me about saying, well, actually getting people there is the big, the biggest point. And yet, and I completely agree with you that it's not good enough to be carbon neutral. We need to be regenerative, because otherwise you're just about to say, well, we've not done any bad today. Isn't that fantastic? So my question is, how does that sit with bringing people from developed countries to those countries on flights, which obviously have an issue from a carbon point of view? How does that sit with what you're demonstrating? How do you deal with that when you're promoting sustainable regions, etc.?
I mean, I don't have the answers to that. I think that's why we are gathered. I've heard a number of responses to that. I like the idea that offsetting is a temporary measure till we get to a place where technology and our ability as a human race to offer different fuels and different technologies. It's probably my belief we have to go backwards before we go forwards, and this may not sit well with the room. I was in a lecture last week at a place called Chatham House, a bit of a think tank and thought leadership place in the UK, that was suggesting that in the Ukraine, in the Donetsk region, 107 of the 120 rare earth materials and raw minerals we need for a green economy are in that region. And it was suggested that that is one of the unspoken reasons as to why the current conflict is happening, is because of the mineral deposit that happens to sit there. I forget the exact figure. I think it was $37 trillion worth of minerals in the Donetsk region are there. So the challenge we have is really complex in that, do I like the idea of extraction and mining? Is that something that I believe in? No, of course not. It kills ecology. It often is damaging to the people that live there. But do we need those minerals to get to the green economy, for lithium, as an example, for batteries, so that we can fly better? Maybe we have to do that. So this idea of offsetting as kind of a medium, short-term solution until we get to a place of a greener economy. But do I believe in travel for all of its other benefits, whether they're social benefits or whether, to get to the ecology benefits that we saw in the forest there in Uganda? Yes, I do. So I don't think there's an easy answer. I think it's complex, as I tried to explain. But I also think we have to have a vision of where we're going to and figure out how we get there. I had an amazing conversation in the transfer from the airport to here with the former Minister of Travel and Tourism of Bulgaria, Nikolina. And she was explaining that she stepped back from politics because she felt that anytime there was a wave or a wind, the rudder would shift, and actually no one knew where they were going. And she wants to get back into politics when that's available. And I thought, obviously I come from the UK, and we've had one or two challenges within our own politics. And I think it was a real light bulb moment of thinking, absolutely, I don't see anyone saying this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, and we're going to stick there. And those that do actually often do so in a way that is damaging as opposed to improving. So, yeah, I think we have to set a vision of where we're going, be clear on how we get there, but understand that there are challenges and complexities on the way. Thanks, Cal. Okay, well, I think I'm not going to stop you from your coffee anymore. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it's been helpful. Would love to chat to you if you'd have more questions.